Tijuana, Baja California, the border city that never sleeps. Neon lights flicker over streets soaked in vice. The scent of gasoline and cheap liquor hangs in the air. Smog from factories mixes with the salt of the Pacific wind. This was no paradise. This was a waiting room for the desperate and the damned. Francisco Javier Arellano Félix was born here, the youngest of 7 brothers, not into wealth, not into privilege, but into chaos. The Arellano name wasn't famous yet, not on billboards, not in police files, but the seeds were already there. In the 1980s, cocaine was more than a drug. It was currency. And the border wasn't just a line on a map. It was a river of cash, flowing north to south, unstoppable. Colombians had the product, but they needed passage. They needed men who understood the terrain, men with no fear, no limits, no conscience. The Arrellanos answered that call. And they didn't just open doors, they kicked them down. They turned dusty roads into golden highways, highways paved with blood. Javier was a boy then, watching, listening, absorbing. He saw the meetings in dark rooms, the envelopes thick with bribe money, the guns resting casually on dining tables like silverware. He saw how the world worked. Power didn't come from elections. It didn't come from prayers. It came from control, over roots, over men, over life itself. In Tijuana, there were no heroes, no saviors, only predators and prey. And the Arrellanos? They chose to be predators. They didn't chase dreams. They carved empires out of the bones of those who stood in their way. Francisco Javier learned young. Power isn't earned, it's taken. And once you take it, you never give it back. Because in this world, mercy isn't a virtue, it's a weakness. And weakness gets you killed. So the boy who sold nothing became the man who sold everything: fear, death, and white powder dreams. By the 1990s, the Arellano brothers didn't just own Tijuana. They were Tijuana. Every street, every cop, every judge, bought, threatened, or buried. The plaza was theirs, a fortress of corruption stretching from the Pacific to the desert. Nothing crossed into California without their blessing. Every kilo of cocaine, every gram of heroin paid tribute, in dollars or in blood. They called it a cartel, but this wasn't a business. This was a monarchy. And the Arrellanos were kings, 7 brothers, 1 sister, each with a role. Benjamin, the strategist; Ramon, the executioner; Eduardo, Luis Fernando, Francisco Rafael, and then Javier, the youngest prince. Smart, quiet, patient, deadly. While others flaunted power, Javier studied it. He learned who to bribe, who to kill, who to keep alive, just long enough to use them. Tijuana in those years was a carnival of excess. Clubs pulsed with music bought by blood. Casinos overflowed with narco dollars. Mansions rose from the hills like fortresses of sin. Gold-plated faucets, imported champagne, exotic pets pacing behind steel bars. And outside those gates, hell. The poor scraping for crumbs while kings feasted on mountains of cash. The Arrellanos weren't saints pretending to be sinners. They were sinners pretending to be kings. They dressed in Armani, prayed to the Virgin, and murdered without hesitation. Priests blessed their guns before holy processions. Narco ballads echoed in the night, telling stories of men who thought they were gods. Violence wasn't just a tool. It was a language, and the Arrellanos spoke it fluently. Enemies weren't defeated, they were erased. Bodies left hanging from bridges, carved with messages written in terror. Entire families wiped out for a single betrayal. Every act of brutality was a billboard. The message? Cross us, and you cease to exist. But fear alone doesn't build empires. Money does. And the Arrellanos had rivers of it. Colombian cocaine flowed through their tunnels, their planes, their private convoys. Every kilo that touched U.S. soil sent dollars back south, millions at a time. They bribed federal police, judges, politicians. They owned airports, they owned borders, they owned silence. And through it all, Javier watched. Not loud like Ramon, not diplomatic like Benjamin, but always calculating, always waiting. Because in this family, blood wasn't just thicker than water. It was thicker than law, and thicker than fear. The Arrellanos believed they had built an empire that could never fall. They believed wrong. Tijuana became a slaughterhouse, not a figure of speech, a literal one. The city of neon lights and border dreams turned into a gallery of death. Bridges became gallows. Bodies swung in the wind, faceless reminders that the rules had changed. On the highways, headless corpses lay sprawled in the dust. The sun baked their skin until it cracked like old leather. Crows circled overhead, waiting for their turn at the feast. This wasn't random. This wasn't chaos. It was choreography, violence as theater. The Arellano brothers didn't just kill enemies, they erased them, erased families, whole bloodlines wiped from the earth. If you crossed them, your name didn't vanish. It was carved into the streets, in blood. Your body became a message, a billboard of pain screaming one truth. Defy us, and you cease to exist. They didn't settle for revenge. They went for annihilation. A rival would die, then his brother, then his wife, then his children, until his surname was nothing more than an echo. Fear wasn't just their weapon, it was their product, their currency. Every killing bought silence. Every massacre purchased obedience. The city adapted. People stopped asking questions, stopped looking too long, because curiosity was fatal. And in Tijuana, funerals came faster than answers. Even the police learned the lesson. Badges didn't grant immunity. They painted targets. You could be bought, or you could be buried. Most chose the first option. The ones who didn't, their faces ended up on the front page, eyes staring at nothing. Violence became ritual. Bodies weren't just dumped, they were displayed, posed. Headless torsos with hands tied behind their backs, notes pinned to their chests like trophies. This is what happens to traitors. And the sound. The sound haunted the nights. Gunfire echoing through the hills. Screams carried on the wind before being swallowed by silence. Dogs barking at nothing, then going quiet because even they knew when to shut up. Meanwhile, inside the gated mansions, the Arrellanos drank aged whiskey and laughed to corridos written in their honor. Priests blessed their bullets. Narco singers turned their crimes into ballads. The killers danced while the city bled. For nearly a decade, Tijuana lived under this reign of terror, a kingdom built not on loyalty, not on love, but on the simple truth every soul understood. Disobedience didn't just cost your life, it erased your existence. And that's how the Arrellanos ruled, not with promises, but with fear sharpened to a blade. Early 2000s. The Arellano Empire is cracking. What was once untouchable now bleeds in the streets. One by one, the pillars fall. Ramon, the Iron Fist, the executioner, dies in Mazatlan, ambushed by rivals. His blood stains the pavement, and with it, the fear he once commanded begins to fade. Benjamin, the architect, the negotiator, lands behind bars. The man who held the network together now stares at concrete walls, his voice silenced by steel doors. Suddenly, the kingdom of terror has no king, only fragments of power scattered like shards of glass. But where others see ruin, Javier sees an opening. He steps in, quietly, without fanfare, like a shadow slipping across a battlefield. Javier wasn't Ramon. He didn't crave the spotlight, didn't hunger for blood's sake. He wasn't Benjamin either, making deals over champagne and handshakes. He was something else entirely, cold, calculating. The youngest Arellano brother, long in the background, now emerging from the smoke. He inherits not just a cartel, but a war. Rivals smell weakness. Sinaloa pushing hard from the east, Juarez testing the borders. Politicians turn on old friends. Even loyal sicarios whisper, "Is it over?" Javier answers with action. He fortifies routes into California, the lifeline of their fortune. Cocaine moves north by the ton. Cash floods south in rivers of green. Airstrips hum with activity. Ocean routes reopen under his command. He rebuilds alliances with Colombian suppliers, reminding them that Tijuana is still a gate they must pass. Bribes flow again. Judges, customs agents, federal cops. The old machine sputters, then roars back to life. But Javier isn't reckless. He doesn't flaunt power like Ramon, parading armored convoys through the streets. He doesn't play the politician like Benjamin. He plays the ghost, a ghost in designer clothes, rarely seen, never photographed, operating from behind tinted glass and guarded walls. Meetings happen on yachts, far from curious eyes. Phone calls last seconds, burner after burner tossed into the sea, every move precise, every risk calculated. And yet, for all his caution, Javier knows the truth. He's not building an empire anymore. He's holding back a flood. Enemies are everywhere. The government wants blood for the years of corruption and slaughter. The DEA has his name circled in red ink, and the Sinaloa cartel, hungrier than ever, is coming for the throne. Still, for now, Javier reigns, not as a king crowned in glory, but as a survivor draped in shadows. And survival in this game is its own kind of power. 2002-2006. The world shifts. The drug war isn't a whisper anymore. It's a roar. After 9/11, the United States sharpens its security blade. Borders tighten. Surveillance deepens. Every truck, every shipment faces eyes that weren't there before. And Mexico? Under pressure. Washington demands results. Extraditions. Arrests. Headlines. The era of unchecked corruption is cracking at the edges. For the Tijuana cartel, the game changes overnight. The empire that once moved cocaine like water now feels the drought of fear. Every route is a risk, every deal a gamble. Javier senses it, the noose tightening, not just from law enforcement, but from wolves circling the throne. The Sinaloa cartel is moving hard, led by men like El Chapo Guzman and Ismael El Mayo Zambada. They smell blood in the water, and they want the Pacific. Tijuana becomes a battlefield, ambushes on highways, shootouts in daylight, bodies left on street corners tagged with notes, "This is Sinaloa." Javier responds the only way he knows, by adapting. He shifts smuggling methods, less overland, more by sea, luxury yachts, fishing boats hiding tons of cocaine beneath layers of false decks. Routes snake through Baja's remote coves, away from prying eyes. New alliances form in Colombia and Central America. Old rivals become partners, at least for now, because survival breeds strange friendships. But adaptation has its price. Every phone call carries a shadow. Every meeting is a risk. Informants multiply like cockroaches. Some sell secrets to rivals, others to the DEA. Javier knows the rules have changed. Bribes don't buy silence like they used to. Politicians fear the cameras now more than the cartel's bullets. The old system, greased with cash and blood, is rusting. And then there's the paranoia. Inside his circle, loyalty is no longer guaranteed. Whispers reach his ears. Someone's talking. Someone's feeding names. He moves like a ghost, switching safe houses, changing phones, vanishing for weeks. But ghosts can't stay hidden forever when the hunt is global. The DEA tightens its net with precision. Task forces map every move, tracing money through offshore accounts, tracking shipments across oceans. What was once myth, a faceless power, is now a name on an operation board. Francisco Javier Arellano Félix, target priority. And Javier feels it, the circle closing, not fast, not loud, but inevitable. Because in this business, you can outrun bullets. You can bribe judges, you can even kill your enemies, but you can't kill time, and time is running out. August 2006, the Pacific Ocean, calm and endless, glittering under a cruel sun. Waves slap against the hull of a luxury yacht, its polished decks gleaming like silver. On board, Francisco Javier Arellano Félix, youngest son of an empire built on fear, the last great prince of Tijuana. To anyone watching, it looks like a vacation, a fishing trip near Cabo San Lucas. Sun, salt, laughter. But behind the sunglasses and designer clothes, Javier knows the truth. This isn't leisure. This is exile at sea. The land is too dangerous now. Rivals hunt him. Authorities hunt him harder. The empire he inherited bleeds from 1,000 cuts. But for a moment, out here on the open water, there is peace, or the illusion of it. Then, shadows on the horizon, a gray vessel slicing through the waves. The U.S. Coast Guard. They move fast, silent, efficient, closing the gap like wolves on a wounded deer. There's no firefight, no last stand, no storm of bullets like the corridors promised. Just orders barked in English, boots pounding on teak decks, rifles glinting in the sun. Javier freezes. For years he lived untouchable, a ghost in suits, a voice that commanded death with a single word. Now he's just another man with his hands in the air. They cuff him, read his rights, and that's it. No explosions, no cinematic ending, just silence, except for the hum of the engines and the ocean whispering beneath the keel. They call it Operation Shadow Game, a quiet strike after years of watching, listening, waiting, an operation built on patience and precision. For Javier, it's more than an arrest. It's a verdict. The empire he fought to save is gone. The world he ruled from behind tinted windows has collapsed into this moment. Kneeling on the deck, wrists shackled, staring at the water as if it might still offer escape. He doesn't beg, doesn't speak. What's there to say? Words can't stop the tide. As the Coast Guard vessel turns toward shore, Javier looks back at the yacht, shrinking into the horizon. His last sanctuary, his last illusion. The Arellano dynasty began with blood and fire. It ends with steel cuffs and quiet seas. Because in the end, that's the truth of this life. Kings don't die on thrones. They drown in shadows. Today, Francisco Javier Arellano Félix wakes up to the same sound every morning, a metal door slamming shut. The youngest prince of Tijuana now lives in a concrete kingdom. 4 walls, a steel bunk bolted to the floor, a toilet that doubles as a confessional. This is his throne now, a life sentence. No appeals, no golden escape routes, no whispered deals in back rooms, just time. Long and heavy, stacked like bricks around him. He was once a ghost in designer suits, a man who slipped past borders and bullets with ease. Now, he's a number, an inmate, a ghost again, but of a different kind. The silence here is loud. There are no corridors singing his name, no convoy of SUVs waiting outside, just guards with dead eyes and cameras that never blink. The power he once wielded is gone. He can't call in a hit, can't move a kilo, can't even choose what he eats. And beyond these walls, the world kept moving. The Tijuana cartel, his family's empire, collapsed under its own weight. What was once a dynasty became dust. Splinter groups rose from the wreckage, each smaller, hungrier, more desperate than the last, like jackals feeding on a dead lion. Sinaloa swallowed routes. Jalisco clawed for control. The plaza that once belonged to the Arrellanos became a war zone with no kings, only scavengers. Javier hears whispers of this from other inmates, fragments of a world he no longer owns. He nods, listens, but says nothing. Because what's the point? Power is a tide. Once it goes out, it never comes back. Some nights he lies on his back, staring at the ceiling. The fluorescent light hums overhead, a cruel imitation of stars. He remembers the ocean, the smell of salt, the sound of waves hitting the hull of his yacht. The last breath of freedom before the Coast Guard came. Does he regret it? No one knows. Javier doesn't talk much anymore. Maybe he's haunted by ghosts. Maybe he's empty. Or maybe, in the stillness of a prison cell, he's finally found the peace he could never buy. The world outside has forgotten his name. There are new bosses now, new wars, new blood soaking the border. But here, inside these walls, time moves slow. Too slow. The Arellano legend was written in blood. It ended in silence. Some cartels die with a bullet, others with a fishing hook.